All right. So Charles, why don't we go ahead and start off with you just telling us your name?
Charles H. Robertson.
All right, and thank you for agreeing to do this interview. As I indicated in my email to you, this is for the 50th anniversary of the Advanced Family Law course, but it also happens to be the 40th anniversary this year for TAFLS, for the Texas Academy of Family Law Specialists. So, as part of manning that booth, we're reaching out to individuals who were kind of among the first class to board certify, and you were in that list.
Yes,
So,
took him 75.
yep. So, the first question I have for you is, well, you just answered it. When did you get board certified in family law? Were you the first class, or how many classes came before you, if any?
No, none. I was in the first class.
All right. So, what made you decide to be the first to jump in?
Well, I wanted to be recognized as a attorney who with special skills and knowledge.
And was there a test
Yes,
when you did that?
yes.
So, who wrote it?
Professor Joseph Webb McKnight, and
So,
I'd had the incredible good fortune of having him for four courses in law school.
so that gave you a little bit of a leg up.
No, it gave me a huge leg up.
So you had insider info.
Yeah, I have a great memory, and I just told Joe what he wanted to hear.
So let me go back to what the exam is, and then we'll return to that. Uh, what was the application process like? Is it like it is today, where you had to list so many mediations that you've done and provide information on them, so many jury trials, so many cases that you've taken through final disposition, or what was the application process?
It's pretty simple because I've done everything that they were uh, questioning me about, and so it was very quick to do the application.
Okay, so it sounds like it was a little less harrowing than it is now. So now the complaint is that the exam isn't as bad as the application.
Yes, I've heard that complaint.
All right. Back when you took it in 75, was there a requirement that you had to be licensed for so many years? For instance, now I think it's 4 years that you have to have been a licensed attorney before you're allowed to sit.
I think it was 5 years at the time.
5. Okay. All right. Do you remember whether there was a requirement for how many different types of cases that you'd handled? Like, was there a section that you had to answer as part of the application for how many parent-child relationship cases that you've had versus property cases?
Yes,
Okay. All right. So back to who wrote and graded the exam. So I can take it from your answer that your previous professor also graded that exam.
yes, and he failed 70% of the people who took it.
All right. And obviously you were not one of them. So I think from our first call, you told me that you got a follow-up call from the Board of Examiners about that test.
That's correct. They asked me if I would regrade the papers, and they were afraid that if the word got out that 70% had failed, that no one would take it. And so I told them if they'd let me set up a commission, uh, I'd be the head of the commission and have three helpers, and we would draft and grade the exam. And they agreed.
And they reached out to you because you got, I think you said you had the top scoring paper or the top scoring
That's what they told me.
response. Okay. So as part, so I here's a question I have for you. What did the percentage come up to after that commission did the regrading?
It was almost 70%. It was in the 60s, high 60s. See, Joe
So,
had an
so
interesting way of grading. If he had 4 points that he wanted you to talk about, on an exam and you only talked about 2, even if it was 100% correct, you made 50. And so if you didn't hit all of the 4 points he was looking for, you were destined to fail.
Got it. So it was more like you had to have breadth rather than being able to discuss fewer things in depth.
Correct.
Um, do you remember how many people took the exam that first year?
I remember it was less than 30.
All right, so was part of the regrading process just concern for your safety if you were you were one of one of the few who made it through?
No, not at all. That I was able to pick my helpers, and I got Harry Tyndall from Houston, and Sampson and Tyndall, everybody knows about their book, and Don Royal, who is an excellent lawyer from Houston, and then Tom Purdom, who actually drafted Title III of the Family Code from Lubbock, and he was the third member of our 4-member group.
So was there a target that you were all trying to hit for a pass rate where it was almost like applying a curve, or was it really just being a little bit more generous in terms of if somebody was making persuasive argument, albeit on a smaller number of issues where they didn't spot all 4 issues, but they persuasively argued and got into detail and depth on 2 or 3 that you're going to be more generous with giving
Well,
points for quality.
that was true for Don Royal, Tom Purdom, and me. We discovered immediately that Harry was much like Joe McKnight. And so I created this system where each grader graded 90 minutes or 1/4 of all of the exams. So Harry couldn't grade one exam and give the person a bad grade that would flunk him. Harry would grade 1/4 of the exam. When we finished grading, we would set up it wasn't a curve, it was just a high score to low score. And what we sought out was a significant place in the grading situation that divided the passes from the fails. So if we had a bunch of folks who made above 69, and then no one who made 68, 67, or 66, then the people who made below that would fail, and the people who made above that would pass. And we set up a very different system. At the time, the way the exam was graded by not just family law, but pretty much everybody, is the test writer graded 100% of the exams. And so what we did is we would meet on Thursday before we graded the papers on Friday, and we would talk about the previous exam and any question that was missed by more than 50% of the people we considered to be a poorly drafted question. So we cast that out. If there were new rules, we added new rules as a part, and new case law, we added that as a part. So we replaced 1/3 of the exam each year. So every 3 years, you had an entirely different exam. And you had to present assign people questions to be on the next exam, and you had to prepare your answer and defend it to the other 3 people. It was a tremendous learning experience because this, smart bunch of guys, and so we learned as much as we taught. So it was a very, very enjoyable time. Now, some of the people dropped out of the commission because they hadn't taken the first exam and they wanted to be bird certified. And so I replaced them with people who had taken the first exam. And I know, for example, Bill Coons, who's a great trial lawyer from Dallas, didn't take it the first year, but he took it the second year. And I think the same thing is true for Don Royal. And so we really enjoyed doing what we were doing. And really, you can't certify competence. You can only certify knowledge. And so we understood that. And so what we were trying to certify is the people that we wanted to call specialists had significant knowledge. And it's just a shame if there were people who were really bright, who passed the exam easily, who were very poor lawyers because they didn't have the skills, other skills. So I've always thought that the specialization program missed the point to some extent. But we did, for example, one time we had a judge who took the exam. And at the time, we hand wrote our exam. And so I looked at my fourth of the exam, of this particular exam. I said, I can't read a word of this. Handed it to Harry, and he said, I can't read it either. And so we decided not to grade that exam. It turned out to be the exam written by a district judge, which was a little bit of an embarrassment. But her court reporter flew to Austin and transcribed her exam, and she passed. But things like that were fun and interesting, and we really took our job seriously.
So how long was it back then?
6
The
hours.
exam.
6 hours.
Okay.
That's about, we divided 90 minutes would be a fourth. And
Was it divided in half between essays and multiple choice back then
not
as well?
initially, not initially. Initially it was half essay, and there were some short answers in addition to the multiple choice. And then at some point in time, I can't remember exactly when, we transitioned to the multiple choice and essay.
And was it administered in Austin where you all had to go and take it there? Or?
Went to Austin, took the exam, and at the time, no one could take it with a computer, and it was all written longhand. And that was one of the challenges in grading, is that some of the people who thought very well didn't write very well.
So I imagine that was before the recodification of the family code. Is that accurate?
No,
Or
no, the family
it was
code.
after?
Yeah, the family code, Title I of the family code was husband and wife. And that became January 1st, 1970. Title II of the family code was parent and child, and that became law January 1st, 1974. And for some crazy reason, Title III, which was children in need of supervision, became law September 1st, 1973. I never could figure out why it jumped ahead of Title II, but so by the time of the first specialization exam, the family code was intact.
Okay. All right. How did you study for it? Since it was the first exam ever.
I didn't. I'd written a book while I was in law school. I learned that lawyers would pay for anything that would save them time. And so I thought, when Title I of the code passes and was effective January 1st, 1970, the lawyers are going to not know what to do because Joe changed all the terminology. You went from visitation and custody to possessory managing conservators. And so I took the two form books that existed prior to the code and rewrote a form book called Forms for Divorce and Annulment of the Family Code. And it was the first book published by the State Bar of Texas.
Okay, well, that's an effective way to learn.
So I felt like that if I didn't know how to pass that test, no one would.
So how long did it take you to get your results, which I guess meant before they announced it at large? But well, I guess it's two questions. I need to break it down. How long after sitting for the exam did you find out that you passed and they were wanting your help? And then how long did the entire process with the regrading take?
I would say 6 weeks to find out when I got the phone call, and then another 4 or 5 weeks to actually regrade the papers.
And when you were doing the regrading, were you allowed to take anyone who passed and then fail them because you didn't like them, or
Uh,
because
we
you
didn't
gave them
know
less points?
we didn't know whose exams there were.
Okay, so they were anonymous back then.
Right, very careful not to know the names. Uh, and we failed some judges, and uh, but a judge made one of the highest grades ever made on the exam. So it was, I think we had a very fair procedure, and we had an appeal. We had 2 levels of appeal. And the family code project was Joe McKnight, Eugene Smith, and Louise Rajo. And Louise never took the exam, so she couldn't be a member of TAFLS. And I told Louise, I said, look, Louise, the final appeal is a sit-down discussion with me about whether or not you know enough to pass the exam. And you're the grandmother of family law. She didn't like that, but she was. And but she never took it, which was a shame, because in TAFLS, I think that we recognize Joe and Eugene and even David Gray and Jack Sampson, and Louise should be right there with them, but she never took the exam.
So, what thoughts, just to change gears, what thoughts do you have about the fact that since TAFLS was founded in '84, that TAFLS is having a anniversary, a milestone this year as well, where it's turning 40?
Well, I really believe that TAFLS has served a great function. It's elevated the standards of what is a good family lawyer, and particularly from a knowledge perspective. And I was invited to be a member of the American Academy of Matrimonial Lawyers before TAFLS came into existence. And I think TAFLS, to some degree, kind of modeled after American Academy. And I was in support of it. I tried to find out if I was one of the original members of TAFLS, but they don't keep their. I emailed them, and they said they didn't go back past 2019. So I know I was a member. I got a email recently asking me if I wanted that was late on paying my dues. But then the people at TAFLS told me I hadn't been a member since 2019. So I don't know what the case is, but whether I'm a member or not, it serves a very valuable function. It allows you the opportunity to talk to and work with and share ideas with and experiences the best family lawyers in Texas. And you can, every time you go to a meeting, you learn something you didn't know. So most of the time, one speech or talk is worth the price of the whole thing.
Right.
And
So I take it you were essentially the introductory class of TAFLS.
I think so. I think I was a member of the original membership group.
And was it a state bar committee that decided to create that specialization subset in the group, and then that group did the test? And how did kind of TAFLS, what was the involvement of TAFLS being created? How was TAFLS created? And then what responsibility did TAFLS have? And once it was created, for setting up board certification, or was it the other way around where people had a board certified?
Board certification came first. TAFLS really came into existence, as I recall, in 1984. And
Okay.
so we'd already had
True. True.
specialization in
Yeah.
town since 75. And, some of I don't think very many of us are still practicing of that original group. I think Harry Tyndall still does some things, but a lot of the guys have stopped practicing. And people ask me why I'm
So,
still practicing now, and I'm 82, and I don't need to do it, but I enjoy it.
yeah. So why do you think it is that it took 9 years to after that first class for board certification to then decide on making the organization for those certified lawyers?
Well, I think it's no one picked up the the cause and went forward. Uh, I know that I remember it was taking 6 to 8 weeks to get a temporary hearing in Dallas, and I got disgusted with that. And so I drafted legislation and created court masters. And then Harry and some of the guys from Houston asked me to help them do it. So 2 years later, they got court masters, and then they changed the name to associate judges. And then any county of over 500,000 could have associate judges. So that picked up San Antonio and Austin and El Paso. And but I think that I would have been a teacher full time, but for the fact I'm too materialistic. And so I did that as an avocation. I taught at SMU and I taught at the University of Dallas. But teachers at that time didn't make any money.
Do you know how big TAFLS was that first year in 84 when you joined? How many people actually joined in? And was it an automatic invitation for everyone who is board certified and active at that point?
I do not remember that. I was not one of the people who organized it. I think I was one of the first people who joined after it was organized, but I do not know who led the charge.
Okay. When did you all meet and how did you decide on where those meetings would occur?
Well, the meetings were sometimes in Houston, sometimes in Dallas, but eventually it seemed logical that the meetings be either in Austin or San Antonio, which is more central. And I think it was just a logistical thing. I think all the family law course meetings are in San Antonio now.
Yep. And did you all just meet annually, or were there more than one meeting? Did you have local meetings?
My memory is that we had 2 meetings a year that were big meetings, and we had a very strong family law section of the Dallas bar, of which I was the president for a while, and so that conflicted somewhat with what TAFLS was trying to do for places that didn't have strong family law sections of the bar.
Right. So what recollection do you have of gender and racial diversity of kind of the group at the outset? Because I know it was a much more male dominated practice, law, earlier on, and now most family law practitioners are actually women. But back kind of at the start in 84, do you remember kind of what some of those meetings looked like in terms of whether it was somewhat homogenous or diverse?
Well, there were Berta Rayburn from Houston and Louise Raggio, Leah Alexander. There were some really good female family lawyers, but I would think less than 20%.
Okay. Well, that's obviously changed a lot.
That's about 50-50 now in law school.
Yep. Yep. I think actually coming out of law school, it's slightly more heavily weighted towards women, is what I've read recently.
I hired women lawyers from the time I started my practice. You know, they seem to pay more attention to detail, waste less time. And so if you can get a female with the same intelligence as a male, it's likely that she'll be more productive.
Mm-hmm. So what do you think of TAFLS now? Do you have any thoughts on what it's grown to?
Well, unfortunately, my wife had cancer. She passed away in December of 2005, 2021. And I've had 4 knee surgeries, 2 heart surgeries, eye surgery, and the cancer. And so probably for the past 5 or 6 years, I have been pretty much inactive. In the family law section of the State Bar, TAFLS, American Academy, I've been virtually nothing. So I can't speak as to what's going on now.
Okay. So what would you want to share about, kind of your journey through family law from starting out and being in that initial class of board certified attorneys to being in the initial class of members to the Texas Academy and Family Law Specialists? What have you kind of taken away from that journey that you'd want to share with people who are, looking to become board certified or are part of that organization now?
Okay, one, you want to be active in your local bar and your state bar. And if you have time and money in American bar. And you need to pick out a job that nobody likes and volunteer to do it. And so I became the chairman of the family law section of the Dallas bar my 3rd year out of law school. And so don't ever give anybody any credit simply because they've done something longer than you've done it. You know, they may have had the same experience over and over and over. So if you can accumulate your experience, you can advance. And I thought people think I'm a bit crazy, but I really enjoy family law. People say, well, isn't that depressing? I said, not at all. I think of myself as a funeral director over dead marriages. And I try to conduct a civil funeral. And I try to create a safety net of an attorney, an accountant, an insurance person, and a banker, so that particularly the women earlier didn't have those skills because they didn't do those jobs. And it gives me great joy to see the people I've helped do well. I guess the happiest time was I'd helped a man in his divorce maybe 12, 15 years ago, got him custody of his 2 kids. He later remarried, and he named his new son after me. I said, I've never heard of anybody naming their son after their divorce lawyer. So, I think you have to put people first. And if you do that, everything else is going to work. And the people that put money first, I think, are short-sighted or don't care. I'm not sure which, one or the other. So I'm almost kind of like a missionary, but I enjoy that. I've tried to teach young.
Go ahead.
And I enjoy writing. Do you know who Bill Dorsanio is?
Yeah, I know of Dorsanios.
Okay. Well, Bill and I did a book called the Texas Family Law Trial Guide. And that was an adventure. I've written 12 books related to family law. and I enjoy that. So I think you need to have avocations that you really enjoy in addition to your practicing law. Practicing law can be your profession. I think you need to have one or more avocations.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your experience and your time and your thoughts with us today. And is there anything else that you can think of that you'd like to say to anyone who's watching this or reading a transcript?
If you don't care about people, you don't be a family lawyer.
Well, probably can't end it on better advice than that. So, Charles, thank you so much for your time today and for all your contributions to the family section of the state bar.
Thank you. Enjoyed it.
Yeah, thanks, and have a great afternoon.
You too.